She is one of the most famous women who ever lived. Her face has been painted thousands of times. Movies have been made about her. Songs have been written about her. Her name is known in almost every country on earth. But here is what most people do not know about her. Cleopatra was not Egyptian by blood. She was more Greek than Egyptian. She was not just a beautiful queen, she was a trained philosopher, a military strategist, and a political genius who used every tool available to her to save her country. She spoke 9 languages, more than almost any ruler of her time. And in the end, she did not die because she was weak. She chose to die because she refused to be paraded through the streets of Rome like a prisoner. This is the real Cleopatra. And her story is far more impressive, far more dangerous, and far more surprising than anything Hollywood ever showed you. To understand Cleopatra, you first need to understand the world she was born into. Cleopatra was born around 69 BC in Alexandria, Egypt. Alexandria was one of the most remarkable cities in the ancient world. It had the great library, possibly the largest collection of knowledge that had ever existed anywhere on earth at that time. It had the Pharaoh's lighthouse, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. It was a center of learning, trade, science, and philosophy. But Cleopatra's family, the Ptolemaic dynasty, were not originally Egyptian. They were Greek. Cleopatra was descended from one of the generals of Alexander the Great, who had taken control of Egypt after Alexander's death over 200 years earlier. Here is something remarkable. Cleopatra was the first ruler in her entire family line, going back over 200 years, who actually bothered to learn the Egyptian language. Every ruler before her had only spoken Greek. They ruled Egypt but never truly connected with the Egyptian people. Cleopatra made a deliberate choice to be different. She did not just learn Egyptian, she learned the language of the priests. She participated in Egyptian religious ceremonies. She dressed in traditional Egyptian royal clothing. To the Egyptian people, she was not just a foreign ruler, she was their pharaoh. And this connection to the people would matter enormously in the battles ahead. In 51 BC, when Cleopatra was about 18 years old, her father died. He left the throne to Cleopatra and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, who was only about 10 years old at the time. In ancient Egypt, it was tradition for a queen to rule alongside a male co-ruler, usually a brother or husband. So Cleopatra and her young brother were supposed to share power equally. But sharing power in ancient royal families was almost never simple. There were powerful advisors around young Ptolemy XIII who wanted to control him, and that meant getting rid of Cleopatra. Within just a few years, those advisors convinced the young pharaoh that his sister was a threat. Cleopatra was pushed out of power, forced to flee Egypt, and exiled to the Syrian desert. She was a queen without a throne, a pharaoh without a kingdom, and she had almost no military force of her own. But Cleopatra was not the kind of person who accepted defeat quietly. She spent her time in exile gathering an army, slowly, carefully, using money and persuasion to recruit fighters. She was planning to take back Egypt by force if necessary. But before she could launch her attack, something completely unexpected happened, something that would change everything. Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt. Julius Caesar was the most powerful military commander in the Roman world. He came to Egypt in 48 BC, chasing his rival Pompey, who had fled there after losing a civil war battle. but Pompey was already dead by the time Caesar arrived. The young Ptolemy XIII had ordered Pompey's murder, apparently thinking this would please the Roman general. It did not. Caesar was reportedly disgusted. Pompey had been a fellow Roman leader. Now Caesar was in Alexandria, the most powerful man in the world, and Cleopatra was stuck in the desert, banned from entering the city on pain of death. So she did something audacious, something bold, something that people still talk about more than 2000 years later. She had herself rolled up inside a large linen sack. Some historical accounts say it was a carpet, and smuggled past the guards into the royal palace. She was secretly delivered directly to the Julius Caesar's private chamber. When the sack was unrolled and Cleopatra stepped out in front of Caesar, face to face, completely calm, completely composed, she immediately began speaking to him. And she did not plead, she did not beg, she made her case clearly, intelligently, and persuasively. She explained her political position, the situation in Egypt, and why helping her would benefit Rome. Caesar was captivated immediately, not just by her appearance. Ancient sources note that she was attractive, but not extraordinarily beautiful by the standards of the time. What captivated Caesar was her voice, her intelligence, her confidence, and her ability to speak multiple languages fluently. A romance began, and with it a political alliance that would give Cleopatra exactly what she needed. With Caesar's backing, Cleopatra's position changed dramatically. Ptolemy XIII and his advisors were furious. They had not expected Cleopatra to find a way inside the palace, let alone win over the most powerful Roman in the world. Fighting broke out in Alexandria, a brutal civil conflict between forces loyal to Ptolemy XIII and Caesar's Roman soldiers supporting Cleopatra. For months, fierce battles were fought through the streets of Alexandria and in the harbor. Caesar's forces were at times outnumbered and in serious danger. At one point, Caesar himself was nearly captured and had to jump from a pier into the harbor and swim to safety, reportedly leaving his famous purple cloak behind because it was slowing him down. Eventually, Roman reinforcements arrived, the tide turned, Ptolemy XIII fled and drowned in the Nile River while trying to escape. At just around 21 years old, Cleopatra had won her civil war and reclaimed her throne. She was now the undisputed ruler of the Egypt, the richest kingdom in that part of the world. She gave birth to a son who she named Caesarion, meaning little Caesar. She claimed the child was Caesar's son. Caesar never publicly acknowledged this, but he also never denied it. Cleopatra's position was stronger than ever, but she knew something important. Egypt's independence depended on staying on the right side of Rome, and Rome was never truly stable. In 44 BC, Julius Caesar was assassinated in Rome. He was stabbed 23 times by a group of Roman senators who feared he was becoming too powerful. For Cleopatra, who was in Rome at the time, this was an enormous blow. Her most powerful protector was gone. Rome instantly descended into chaos and another civil war, this time between Caesar's supporters and his assassins. Cleopatra quickly returned to Egypt with her son Caesarion. She needed to protect her kingdom and wait to see how the Roman power struggle resolved itself. The civil war in Rome eventually came down to two main sides. On one side was Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir. On the other side were Mark Antony and Cleopatra's old ally, a Roman general named Lepidus. Mark Antony was given control of the eastern part of the Roman world, which included Egyptian territory and neighbors. This made him the most important Roman power as far as Cleopatra was concerned. And so Cleopatra arranged a meeting. Cleopatra had already proven once with Julius Caesar that her first impression could change her life. She was not going to waste the second chance. When Mark Antony summoned her to meet him in the city of Tarsus in modern day Turkey, Cleopatra did not arrive quietly. She arrived on a barge decorated with gold. The sails were made of purple, the color of royalty. Her oars were made of silver. The boat was filled with music. She was dressed as Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. Servants fanned her with peacock feathers. The air was reportedly so filled with perfumes and incense that people on the river bank could smell the barge before they could see it. The ancient writer Plutarch described the scene as so extraordinary that crowds from the entire city ran to the river bank to watch, leaving Mark Antony sitting alone at his own banquet table, almost no one around him. When Cleopatra finally invited Antony to come to her ship for dinner, rather than going to him, he came. It was a master class in political theatre. She was communicating something very clearly without ever saying it directly. I am an equal to Rome. I am not your subject. I am a partner. Mark Antony was completely won over. They began a relationship and a political alliance that would last over a decade and produce 3 children together. Together, they were one of the most powerful couples in the ancient world. Together, they controlled enormous wealth, land, and armies. But they had one very dangerous enemy watching them closely from Rome: Octavian. Octavian was Caesar's adoptive son, and he had inherited his adoptive father's ambition completely. He wanted to be the sole ruler of Rome, and Mark Antony, with Cleopatra's wealth and armies behind him, was the only thing standing in his way. Octavian was clever. Rather than simply attacking Antony directly, he launched a propaganda war first. He told the Roman people that Antony had been bewitched by an Eastern queen, that Antony had abandoned his Roman values, that Cleopatra was a dangerous foreign woman trying to use Antony to conquer Rome itself, that the real enemy was not Mark Antony but Cleopatra. By framing Cleopatra as the villain, Octavian could declare war on Egypt instead of on a fellow Roman general. It was politically brilliant. In Rome, it worked. The public and the Senate turned against Antony and Cleopatra. War became inevitable. In 31 BC, the deciding battle took place at sea near a place called Actium on the western coast of Greece. Octavian's admiral Agrippa had outmaneuvered Antony and Cleopatra's fleet strategically even before the battle began. Antony's forces had been weakened by disease, desertion, and a naval blockade that had cut off their food supplies. The Battle of Actium was a disaster for Antony and Cleopatra. Cleopatra's ships, for reasons historians still debate, some say it was planned retreat, others say panic, turned and sailed away from the battle. Antony, when he saw Cleopatra's fleet leaving, made the fateful decision to follow her. In doing so, he abandoned his own soldiers, who fought on without their general before eventually surrendering. Octavian now had a clear path to Egypt. Antony and Cleopatra returned to Alexandria. Their combined forces were simply not strong enough to stop what was coming. Within a year, Octavian's armies reached Alexandria and began their final advance. One by one, Antony's remaining allies surrendered to Octavian. Then a false report reached Antony. Someone told him that Cleopatra was already dead. Antony, believing he had lost both his military campaign and a woman he loved, fell on his own sword. It was a mortal wound, but he did not die immediately. Barely alive, he was carried to where Cleopatra was still hiding. He died in her arms. Cleopatra was now completely alone, a prisoner in her own palace, and Octavian was coming for her. Octavian arrived in Alexandria. He treated Cleopatra with a show of respect, but she was smart enough to know the truth. She asked to be allowed to see Antony's tomb, and the request was granted. She brought flowers and said goodbye. Then she returned to her chambers. Octavian wanted Cleopatra alive. He wanted to take her back to Rome and parade her through the streets in chains, a living symbol of his victory and Rome's conquest of Egypt. It was standard Roman practice with defeated rulers. It was the ultimate humiliation. Cleopatra had watched what happened to other queens who were taken to Rome as prisoners. She knew exactly what was waiting for her, and she refused. On August 12, 30 BC, Cleopatra arranged a meal in her private rooms. She dressed in her finest royal robes. She had her hair and makeup done perfectly. She lay down on her golden couch, and then she died. The most accepted theory, and the one that has become legend, is that she allowed a venomous snake, an asp, to bite her. The snake had been smuggled into her chamber in a basket of figs. Others suggest she used a hidden pin dipped in a poison. No one knows for certain because no one was with her at the moment. Octavian's soldiers found her when they broke down the door. She was dead, dressed as a pharaoh on her throne. Two of her servants had died besides her. She was 39 years old, and with her death, 3,000 years of ancient Egyptian civilization and independent rule came to an end. Egypt became a Roman province. There would never be another Egyptian pharaoh. Cleopatra was the last. Cleopatra ruled for about 21 years. She survived a civil war against her own brother. She formed alliances with the two most powerful men of her era. She kept Egypt independent for longer than almost anyone else could have managed. She was not simply a romantic figure, she was a strategist, a linguist, a politician, a ruler who fought until the very last moment. History, mostly written by Romans who had every reason to make her look bad, reduced her to a beautiful temptress who manipulated powerful men. But the reality was almost exactly the opposite. It was her intelligence, her preparation, and her political skill that made her remarkable. Even the way she died was a choice, a deliberate, dignified decision that kept her from becoming Octavian's trophy. Cleopatra did not lose, she chose her own ending, and over 2000 years later, her name is still known in every corner of the world. That is not the story of a woman who failed, that is the story of a woman who, against impossible odds, played the most dangerous game in the ancient world and played it better than almost anyone else ever had. If Cleopatra's story surprised you, hit that subscribe button because every single day past portraits bring you stories like this one. Real people, real history, told in a way that actually makes sense. Drop a comment below and tell me what surprised you most about Cleopatra and what historical figure should past portraits cover next. I will see you tomorrow with another story you will not forget.